Hi, everyone. I'm Sam Osterhout, the executive producer here at Lincoln Square, and I am joined for my wonderful weekly conversation with Andra Watkins of the Substack For Such a Time as This. Hey, Andra, how you doing?
I'm great. How are you, Sam?
Great. Uh, so good. Just wonderful. Oy, oh, geez. Well, today we're going to do something a little different, which I'm pretty excited about. We are having our first ever guest.
I'm
Pretty
so excited about her. I can't wait to have this
I know,
conversation.
and you guys have so much in common. We're having Ryan Wiggins on, chief of staff at Lincoln Project, who I didn't realize until just recently that she has an evangelical background, and has a lot to say about all the things, all the things.
And I think it's really important that we hear from multiple voices who have this experience because, it lends credibility to everyone who's talking about it. So it always excites me to see more people talking about their experiences with white Christian nationalism publicly. It helps everyone understand that the people who are talking about this aren't making it up, that it really is a thing.
I agree, and I think it's so uh, it's a priority for Lincoln Square, and
Mhm.
I credit you for making that a priority for us, because
Thank you. Wow.
well, really, because it's one of you know I wanted to tee off of this. I'm just getting so many. I'm getting bombed. Hold on, let me put it on mute. I don't
Okay.
know if you can hear my dings. That is the life of the producer at Lincoln Square. It's just constant. Um, but I wanted to tee off the Peter Thiel thing because his comments about the Antichrist and saying that people like Greta Thunberg are the legionnaires of the Antichrist seems so wildly unhinged. And you wrote about it. That was yesterday, I think, right?
Yes. Yes, I wrote about it yesterday, but I've written a lot since I started my Substack about these apocalyptic end times beliefs that Peter Thiel has been giving these private lectures on. So I was trying to help people understand, along as I wrote about Project 2025, that there's a subset of Christian nationalists who believe we're living in the last days, we're living at the end of the world, and the Antichrist will rise and cause this 7-year period of horrors that will culminate in a great battle in Armageddon, the Valley of Megiddo in Israel. So, it drives a lot of their foreign policy decisions related to Israel because Israel has to exist as a nation for all of these prophecies to come true. That's really why this crowd cares about Israel. It has
Right.
nothing to do with Jewish people. It's about a map and a piece of land on a map. And so I've been talking about that now for almost 2 years and trying to help people who didn't grow up in these kinds of environments understand that there are millions of people who believe that we're living at the end of the world. So Peter Thiel choosing to talk about this now is a strategic decision for me.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, and I wanted to, I came out with a sort of nationwide study of white Christian nationalism. And the thing is, to those of us normies who didn't grow up in your context, it feels just like a bonkers, like those people are lunatics. They're the people at the edge of town with their
Mhm,
signs, that say the sky is falling. But everyone, those people have formed a union and it is national, right?
mhm,
And so,
mhm.
I wanted to show some slides about this, views on the patriarchy, that 70 some percent of adherents to white Christian nationalism believe that we, as a nation, we're just too feminine, um, which I don't know what that even means. That God was ordained, or Trump was ordained by God to be president. That's 67% of adherents,
Mhm.
and a big chunk of sympathizers as well. And political violence is more widely supported by adherents, right? This is an interesting thing. I thought that adherents also believe pretty widely in QAnon conspiracy theory.
Mhm.
And this is your piece from today, which ties into a lot of this, how white Christian nationalist men indoctrinate women. And I think with that, I really want to, let's bring in Ryan.
Okay.
Hey, Ryan.
Hey.
Hello. So I've been backstage and I have been listening, and I read the fabulous piece on Peter Thiel. And I want to say I have my own take on that. And I think that it has a lot to do with the fact that my generation, Gen X, grew up with the Left Behind series. And they were bestsellers. You were encouraged to read them if you were in church, but people who weren't in church were reading them too. And they were fully crazy. They were fully insane. Did a really good job of evangelicalizing an entire generation of people, because the novels, and they were novels, they were all nonfiction or all fiction. They were full of fear. They were full of horror. They were full of, all of these awful things that are going to happen if you're left behind. And we now know that the rapture itself is not a thing. It's bad theology. It's nowhere in the Bible, but this is what they believe. And this is where kind of how we've gotten to where we are. So what Peter Thiel's actually doing is preying on a seed that was planted back in the early 90s with a huge population of the American public, a lot of whom are still in churches. And he's plugging back into that exact same fear that was so prevalent that it started. I mean, even where I live, there was a huge revival around the time of the Left Behind series, the Brownsville Assembly of God revival, and it was an international revival here, all sparked by this series. And so I think that is one of the things that Peter Thiel is actually trying to do here, is to tap into that generational trauma that those of us who read the series are having to deal with. And I'm sorry, there's construction around me, so if y'all are hearing beep beep beep, I'm so sorry.
I thought that was the rapture. I thought it was your rapture alarm.
I'm gonna be here if you need anyone to take care of your dogs. I'm your girl.
Great.
I think we had the Left Behind series in my house too, because I grew up in South Carolina. So you and I grew up very similarly, and we're both Gen X. And so we have a lot in common.
Mm-hmm.
But it also created this sense of nihilism amongst
Mm.
Christian nationalists who believe this, that, well, of course, things are going to get bad. And things are supposed to get bad at the end of the world. So the worse things get, the more happy we need to be about it, because Jesus is coming. And so I think that's another thing that Peter Thiel has used these lectures to tap into, is this group of people who are radicalized by this thought process, to be able to say, as things get worse in America, well, America doesn't exist in the Bible at the last days, and America's not there, and everything's supposed to get terrible, and this is the Bible coming true, and let me show you how it's coming true, to people who may be skeptical of this stuff in their community. So I think that's part of the strategy behind him talking about it. And this incredibly rich and very smart white man is talking about these things. So surely it's not crazy.
Well, and I mean, you grew up in an evangelical church too, right? You're used to being lectured to by rich white men. And told how to think and told how to feel about those kinds of things. I think that you're absolutely right. I think that the other thing that the evangelical community has a really hard time with is there's so many things, but one of them, and we were talking about this before the show started, right, is that from the age of like infancy, you go into a church and you are taught that it is a sin against God to question your faith. So if things don't make sense and you question it, doubting Jesus, and if you're doubting Jesus, that is the one unforgivable sin, so you will go to hell. And so you're taught this as a child. This is indoctrinated in you like from birth. And so he's also tapping into this. He's tapping into that you cannot question. And so is Trump, and so is the entire administration. You should not question what we're telling you. What we're telling you is the honest to God truth. And the other thing that's very fascinating is evangelicals have a habit, because of this, they don't have the critical thinking skills, right? They have never been taught them because they've been encouraged to not think critically about anything. And so they're sitting here and they're getting all of this information, and everything that we are trying to tell them is all sin and is all wrong and whatever, because we are bringing doubt into their faith. And that is something that they have been conditioned on since they were babies. I mean, it is really, really hard to change that kind of indoctrination.
Yeah, this Linda asked, what are they so afraid of? And I wonder if you have a take on this. It feels like a shattering of certainty is would be destabilizing to somebody who's been taught that certainty is all you have.
Well, I'm
What?
going to talk about this from a very personal standpoint. Okay.
Please do.
I went through a full crisis of faith in 2020. I mean, I was raised evangelical. I had left the evangelical church long before because I did question, and there were things that just did not make sense to me as a kid. I want to write about it. I just haven't gotten there yet. But I was still in a church. I was in a Methodist church that is very accepting of other people. It lives the life of Christ, but I could not be associated with Christianity as Christianity is currently interpreted in America. That's not Christianity. I decided, and it took me years. I mean, I was in a full crisis of, I don't know what I believe right now. I don't know where I am. And that is a very scary place to be because you feel like there's no net under you. The things that you have believed your entire life, you're questioning for the very first time. And if this isn't real, then what else isn't real? And it causes a really uncomfortable feeling. And like I said, I had it for years. And what I finally made peace with is that I am not a Christian. I am a follower of Christ. Christ did not say, worship me. Christ said, follow me. And that is where evangelicals miss it. I mean, I grew up in a church where we sang to start our service, Onward Christian Soldier. And I remember
we did it marching in place.
Yes.
Yeah, Andrew, you talked about this before.
Yes. And I remember thinking, what in the hell? Like, why are there Christian soldiers marching as to war? Like, what? Jesus is supposed to be about love and compassion and understanding and welcoming and accepting. And why are we marching as with the cross of Jesus going on before? Like, what in the hell is this? Right? And what I've come to realize is that there are two Jesuses in American faith. There is Jesus, the pacifist lamb. Okay. And that's not Jesus either. Jesus overturned tables. Jesus was an instigator. Jesus got people fired up. Okay. But there is this idea of the passive lamb. And then there's this idea of Jesus the warrior. And Jesus the warrior exists in Revelation. And that is where Peter Thiel is coming from, is he is trying to tap into Jesus the warrior because Jesus the warrior isn't woke. Jesus the warrior isn't compassionate. Jesus the warrior is about to lay out this whole entire world and show you where you've been wrong. You're going to be punished for 7 years, and then we're all going to go up to heaven because at that point in time, you're going to know that he is the Savior. There is nothing that Jesus ever said that even slightly tracks with that message. Revelation is completely separated from the Gospels, and the Gospels are the only books in the entire Bible that have the actual word of God in them if you are a Christian or a follower of Christ and that is what you believe. So this is, I mean, that is a disconnect in this country, and that is a disconnect that's happening in churches like the church that I grew up in, and the churches around here that are very, very Southern Baptist. They worship Jesus the warrior. There are churches like the Methodist church that I'm a part of now. And I like I said, I've stopped going because of the stigma around Christianity and that I'm not a part of that. But they celebrate Jesus, the pacifist, Jesus, the lamb, Jesus, the acceptor. And when there's that kind of divide in Christianity in this country, there's obviously going to be a divide in that Christian base. And that is why you're seeing things like Christians against Trump. That's why you're seeing things like the Pope come out against the things that he's doing, because there is absolutely nothing in this MAGA world that is reflective of Jesus Christ and his teachings. And that's a long answer for what are they afraid of, but what they are afraid of is going to hell.
I would imagine that, and Andrew, you've talked about this in the past, that it's also when you have that conflict, it's not just your own personal faith, but your relationships to everyone in your life, and your entire community and your family. That's a scary thing to, come out of the closet as not white Christian nationalist when everyone has no other vision of the world.
That is such a powerful thing to say too. Come out of the closet as a non-Christian nationalist. That is powerful, and yes, that is exactly how it feels.
And you lose everything when you do that. I mean, you don't keep the people who are in that world. I so related to what you were saying, Ryan, because I was indoctrinated that faith is certainty. And faith is the opposite of certainty.
Yep.
So, I had to do the same process of deconstructing all of that faith is certainty thing to understand that faith is, I can't prove that I'm right. I can't prove that anybody's right. I just believe this because it speaks to me.
Yep.
And that's all. And
Yep.
so, it's really hard to relate to people who can't think that way. Once you start thinking that way, you do really lose a lot coming out of
You
these
wake
beliefs.
up.
Yeah.
That's the interesting thing about this whole concept of wokeism. It means you're awake. So once you wake up and you can see that the things that you were taught growing up in these churches doesn't track with the teachings of Christ, doesn't track with the Bible. I mean, it's like the Israel thing, for example. Like they talk about, the chosen people of God. It's not Israel as a place. I mean, that's the issue. It's not literally Israel. It is Israel as a mindset. It is the rebirth of the Christian Israel that it was supposed to come after Christ. And so, I mean, when you're looking at this as a place, you've got it wrong from the beginning. Like you have misinterpreted the Bible from the get-go, and now you're pulling for Armageddon. You're pulling for this horrible, divisive world that we are currently living in, when that is nowhere in the Bible. That is not what this was about. And they can't question it. And oftentimes their preachers have not gone to seminary, have not studied the Bible, are not theologians, and they're just repeating what they have heard. So you have the blind kind of leading the blind, and you have misinformation spreading in this community. And it's impacting all of us because they are not awake to what we see. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. So there's no going back to that little comfortable space. I mean, it's kind of like how I used to be a Republican, right? Like I believed that my party was the party of family values. I believed that we believed in Christian values, and that we were the good people, right? We were the good, solid people in this country. We were the godly ones. Holy mackerel, was I wrong, right? And once you start seeing this, oh, well, the prevalence of pedophilia in the Christian church and the religious right is kind of whoa. And you start seeing that, and you start seeing the abuse, and you start seeing that they silence women and that women can't be leaders, even though in Jesus's church, Mary Magdalene was one of the big leaders of the movement. I mean, he always relied on women. When he rose from the dead, who did he go to? Women. Okay. But the evangelical church will not acknowledge women. They do not allow women in. So once you start seeing this stuff, and once you start realizing the hypocrisy between the church and the Bible, and the church and the teachings of Christ, you can't unsee it, and you can't go back to that comfortable little space. Just like I couldn't go back to that comfortable little space of Republican ignorance, because I know better. It makes you very uncomfortable. That kind of cognitive dissonance where you're having to learn that you've not only been wrong, but your wrongness has impacted other people, is something that you have to reckon with. And it's a really hard, as someone who has reckoned with it, it is really, really hard. It is traumatic. There were tears, there was rage, there was the whole thing, because it was a detox from all of this toxicity that I'd been raised around.
It's hard. I had the same journey. I mean, I voted Republican for a long time and worked for the Republican Party and volunteered and all of that. So it's hard as a grown-up in your 30s or 40s
Yes.
to realize that the way you've believed your whole life is wrong. And a lot of people, you have to face so many things about yourself. A lot of people say this is too hard.
Oh yeah.
And they give up, and they stop trying, and they go back to that comfort. As you said, it was a comfortable place. Really, it's a very uncomfortable place, but at least you aren't facing anything. So you're can
not being
put
challenged
that blanket.
there.
Yeah. So it's an easy place to stay once you start trying to come out of it and realize how hard it's going to be and how much you're going to have to face.
Yeah, and
That's
how much
why a lot of
critical
people
thinking
don't
you
leave.
have to have. I mean,
Yeah.
and I don't mean to sound like this, because this is going to sound nastier than I mean it. But there's also an intellectual thing. I mean, I think that I go through life assuming that everyone is smarter than me. Like on the bell curve, I'm like, I'm kind of like here. Everyone else is over here, right? But that's not the case. I mean, if you look at yourself as kind of the middle of the bell curve, there are people who are more intelligent than you. There are people who are less intelligent than you. Those on the less intelligent side don't have the critical thinking. They don't have the skill sets or the knowledge to be able to dissect this, which is another reason that it's really important that it's dumbed down. It's really important that we talk about this in a way that people can understand it, that it's not political jargon that's going over their heads, and that it's coming from people who've been there. So, I mean, I think that that's really important to note. We expect everyone around us in this whole political world to have the same level of intelligence. You think you're talking to someone like you, and you're not. You're not. A lot of times, these people who are raised in these evangelical churches haven't ever spent a day inside of a school. I mean, I know in Pensacola, Florida, we have Pensacola Christian College, which is a huge evangelical college. And
I
they are
know
also,
it.
yes, they are also the basis for all of the homeschooling books that are sold around the country. That is actually how this group makes money. And so they're being homeschooled that, you know, dinosaurs were not real and Jesus was walking around at the beginning of the earth 2,000 years ago. Like, they don't know. You can only, we talked about this a little bit yesterday, Sam. It's like, you don't know what you don't know until you've been exposed to it. And they haven't been exposed. And where they are exposed to it, it's over their heads. So you've got to bring it to them. You've got to bring it to where they are. And you can't judge them for being where they are. And that's really hard to do too, because you're like, okay, you're judging everyone else. Like, for example, in Pensacola, we have a Christmas drag show that's happening here. And it's happening in our theater here. And the theater is supplemented by the city, and so people are all in outrage over this whole thing, right? And it's like, how is this affecting your religion? How is somebody out doing something else? And they can't tell you that, but they know it makes them uncomfortable because they've been told it makes them uncomfortable. When you could just say, okay, well, these people are kind of uncomfortable in their skins too, and this makes them feel more comfortable in their skins. They're able to go and dance away their grief as opposed to, you know, potentially killing themselves. I mean, it's having these kinds of conversations. It's exposing them, but exposing them in a gentle way that does not feel aggressive. It does not feel like you are talking down to them. It does not feel like you are judging them. It feels like, oh, I didn't know that. Thank you for letting me know. But you can't hit that from a judgy place.
I think coming from the sort of secular squish, you know, in the middle of the country, I think this is such an important conversation. I know people in the chat are saying you are telling my story, and like you said earlier, it is wildly important for anyone who has this story to speak out, because the people in the secular squish, which I'm going to trademark, I don't know if I want to be associated with something called the squish, but anyway. Nonetheless, I think that your conversion stories are stories in which you made a choice. You made an intellectual and an emotional choice, and it was fraught and probably the hardest thing you've ever done. And I think there's a lot of us who just decide we're not atheists, we're not agnostic, we're not religious. We're just like, I don't want to think about this.
Yeah.
Right? But you know, going back to Peter Thiel, he tied America's decline to the year 1920 when women got the right to vote. This is coming for you, whether you have made a choice to stay in, to get out, or no choice at all. And so for us in that squish, we have to understand this, that the stories you're telling could be a vision of our future.
It is going to be a vision future.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the reasons that I made the choice when I started writing about Christian nationalism from my experiences last year. People don't want that education with a side of, let me tell you what Jesus means to me. I mean, Tim Alberta does that, and he's a great, I'm not criticizing him. There's a place for that kind of talking about Christian nationalism. Mm-hmm. But I wanted to talk about it from the standpoint of just let me tell you what these people believe. Let me tell you how they're indoctrinated. I'm not telling you to believe it. I'm not saying I believe it, but I want to give a safe space where whether you're a devout Christian, Catholic or Protestant, or an atheist, you can come here and learn what these people believe. So it's been really important that people in that squish place, you know, have a place to come where they can learn regardless of what they believe or don't believe about what happens after we die. And I'm really proud of that. I think that's an important ingredient to have, and we need more of that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Like I said, I mean, you know, when you're walking among those who are sleeping, you don't jolt them awake with a loud alarm clock. You just gently, hey, have you thought about this? And I mean, a lot of times it is, I mean, my path to being where I am at Lincoln, my path to being where I am in my spiritual journey, all of this came from one question. And that question was why? Okay. And people in this country, we don't ask why. And in just conversation, we don't ask why enough. If we asked why more, we would have a better understanding of where everyone is, and we probably wouldn't be in this mess. But I asked why. And then I started digging on that why. And so if you want to get someone to start asking those questions, the way you actually get them to start asking those questions is you ask them why. So that's interesting. That's an interesting point. Why do you feel that way? So tell me about what led you to this mindset. And rather than judging it, hear them. Listen to them. Because if you're actually listening and you're not listening to argue, you're not listening to win an argument, you're listening to understand, there's a totally different vibe there. And if you're listening to understand and you're starting to have that kind of conversation with someone, then you are not threatening, then they can listen, then they don't feel like they're being attacked, and you can get through. But that's the only way you can get through. Ask the questions, force them to start questioning why in a safe space, not why do you believe in Jesus? And oh my God, why would you believe that he's, the answer, that this is the Antichrist? Greta's the Antichrist? How about Trump? No, that isn't going to work. You've got to meet them where they are.
And also, part of that indoctrination is being taught all of these words that are thought terminating cliches, all of these phrases. Those thought terminating cliches get triggered when they start questioning, when you ask them why, and they start feeling emotionally uncomfortable. So when they throw out just the Bible just says so, and that's what I believe, that's one of those thought terminating cliches. You know that you've kind of hit something and maybe you need to pull back. Don't argue with those thought terminating cliches. Realize, okay, I've planted my seeds for today or for this conversation, to use a biblical analogy of planting, sowing, and reaping. You've planted those seeds, and now I'm going to let those work for a while and see what comes up, and maybe we'll have a conversation again. It's really important not to argue and put pressure on people who are in these positions.
And I think what you said about planting the seed and giving it time to germinate and grow. So you have these conversations, and if they are not aggressive conversations and people are not defensive in them, they will go home and think about them because you have questioned something deep within them that they have not questioned in themselves before. So if you give it a chance to grow, and that doesn't mean like every time you see this person, you have this other conversation. If you're doing that, you're evangelicalizing to them, and it's just as aggressive as having a Jehovah's Witness show up at your door. Don't do that, right? But have a conversation and then let it go. Let it go. Move on. Have another conversation and revisit it, but revisit it when they bring it back up. I promise you they will. I promise you, if you plant the seed and you do it in a gentle way that allows them to think about it, allows them to not feel judged, they will come back to you and follow up, because it is fascinating. And there isn't a Christian alive who hasn't questioned their faith. There are Christians alive who have not publicly questioned their faith because they don't want to go to hell. If you're questioning your faith, you allow them to do so too in a way that doesn't feel like they're going to hell. And if they're going to hell, they're going to join you there anyway. So, it's right?
So this in the few minutes we have left, we're talking about real one-on-one personal conversations. And I think those are the conversations we should be having anyway, whether it's politics or religion, and the two are sort of meshing together at the moment. But I wonder if either of you have any thoughts on bigger, broader messages that puncture the white Christian nationalist story for those in the sort of movable middle. What is messaging that breaks through? Is there any messaging from the top or from big messengers or media that will move people?
It's hard for me to answer that question because I don't like the term Christian nationalism. It's an academic term that academics came up with. And I used it because it's become mainstreamed enough, but I don't like it because Christians who aren't Christian nationalists often feel attacked because they don't know what Christian nationalism is either.
Sure.
Many of them. And so they've never been exposed to that in their churches. They've never been around it. And so it's a term that I don't like, but because it's so mainstream, I keep talking about it as a thing. There are a section of people who call themselves Christians who are Christian nationalists, and this is what they believe. I think it's really important to get that message out to as many people as possible. 10% of Americans roughly are full-on white Christian nationalists. 20% are white Christian nationalists adjacent. So this isn't a small portion of Christians in the United States. It's millions and millions and millions of people. Even if you don't know any, there are still a lot of them. And so it's really important that Christian communities understand what Christian nationalists believe so that they can differentiate themselves and talk about their faith differently. I think James Talarico does the best job of this of anyone that I've seen, if you look at how he talks about his faith and gives people a way in. Yeah.
An incredible messenger.
And I would say it's getting so loud. Everyone decided to go outside and do lawn work right now. But my answer to that is still the same thing. It's like, I don't know that there's big messaging that breaks through. Yeah. I think the big messaging, if it were going to break through, there's no more powerful messenger to Christians than the word of God, the word of Jesus Christ. And if that is not breaking through, I don't think there's anything that we're going to say that's going to break through other than to have these little one-on-one conversations where you can actually talk to people personally. Like, you can tell them your story, right? Like, so when I talk to people about all of this, I talk about my journey to where I am. I talk about spiritual abuse when I was a child, and it not from my parents and not sexual. It just was up here. It was really, really messed up, the things that my church did to me. I talk about those sort of things, and people can relate to those things because they didn't feel good to them either. And so you tap into like the little places where there was hurt, where you're a little church hurt. And you start talking about, how did you feel when, like, okay, so you had a friend who showed up to church on a Sunday morning in high school, and they showed up hungover. And a high school kid shouldn't be drinking anyway, and they definitely shouldn't be at church hungover. So your friend got kicked out of Sunday school. How do you feel about that? And you start having those conversations because no one should ever be kicked out of church. And if you show up hungover, you definitely want to be there. So, I mean, it's having those kinds of conversations. Where were you church hurt?
Mm-hmm. Right.
And I'm going to go on mute because it is so loud. I'm so sorry.
Well, I think with that, we should probably wrap this up. And I'm just so grateful to have both of you on. And Ryan, I want you to come back. Andrew, we should really have...
I will come back anytime. This was a great conversation, one that I am passionate about. So please have me back. This was wonderful.
And I also want to recommend reading Andra's piece today on white Christian nationalist men and their indoctrination of women. Oh, it's a very old story, and it's very important to continue talking about it. And so if you don't already, you really need to subscribe to For Such a Time as This. Guys, thank you so much for this conversation.
Thank you. It's always great to hang out with you, Sam. I look forward to it every week.
Me too. It's literally my favorite day. I love it. All right. Thanks, everyone. Okay. And I was going to say one more thing. Speaking of Ryan and Andra talking about your own experience, I want to put this to the audience. I would love to get, if anyone's comfortable, I know that there are a lot of people in the chat who are saying, this is my story. If you have an inclination, film yourself or record your voice. Tell us 30 seconds or a minute of your story, and then I'll put a place in the Lincoln Square chat where you can post that. And if you want to, we can air a couple of them next week. I love these stories. They are so important, and the community here is incredible. So that's
and
my
it's great to feel like you're not alone. I mean, it really helps to hear these stories because it helps more people go, oh wow, this happened to me too. I'm not alone. Yep. Because this is a very lonely place. Sometimes you feel like I'm the only person that this happened to. So it's so great to be here with Ryan and to know that I'm not alone again. I mean, I know that now, but every time you meet someone, it's great.
It feels
Yeah.
good to have these kinds of conversations, right? There's validation there. So I appreciate y'all welcoming me on. I would love to read some of your stories too. Sam will send them to me. I would love to read them, because you never know when you're going to say something that's going to help Lincoln Project with some messaging that might get through to somebody. So please do share those things. And thanks
Amazing.
again for having me on. Thank you
Awesome.
guys for joining us today.
Thanks, guys. Have a good week.
Bye.